Michal, Ariel, Nicole, yes, Nicole, I did look it up after our last class. It is 100% as I suspected.
What is?
To neuterize animals or people, for a woman to like have what they call a hysterectomy, only under severe medical necessity. I remember when I was growing up, I grew up in a very successful community of Jewish people who were all born in poverty. All of my parents' friends, they're all born into poor families. My father was an orphan, my mother was an orphan. They went to school, they excelled, they went into professions, they worked hard, they did well, and they rose up. My mother used to tell me about a certain doctor. We had, in those days, they didn't do things like we do here, mixed school, separate schools. They were mixed, and people were dating. And this one young man was unsuccessful in his social life, and he became a gynecologist, and he used to take it out on his patients. He was a brilliant doctor, but he always would find a reason why. Okay, we're in chapter 12. Anyway, these things are not allowed. Sometimes I read, I think Danny Hess even mentioned it, that people, they try and work around it. But working around the letter of the law, working around the law through loopholes that you can find in the letter of the law, you're not really keeping the law. And the law is for the benefit of the whole world. It's Hashem's law. So Danny suggested this is what people do. They give their animal to a Gentile, the Gentile castrates or neuterizes the animal, and so then they give it back to them, they buy it back. And of course, there are cases in our own communities where normally, if women nurse their own children, it spreads things out because a nursing mother doesn't conceive. So just like Shemitah year gives the land a rest. If you're using the land year after year after year after year, it loses all its nutrients. So you have to, next year's a Shemitah year, a year of rest, a Sabbath year for the land in Israel, not outside. And what farmers lose on one hand, they make up in other ways. Because doing this brings with it all kinds of, I'm just investigating this now and reading stories about the blessings that it brings to people. And one person told a story about how he lost a lot of money that he'd invested. He had to borrow from banks and everything to develop his farm. He lost it all. But then the fields that he laid fallow produced like bumper crops of grass for grazing and saved him hundreds of thousands of dollars. He didn't have to buy food for the animals. He lost on one hand, he gained with the other gained more. I remember reading a story about a person, it's a big industry in Israel, is flowers. They have huge greenhouses of flowers. And one person kept Shemitah, decided he was going to keep Shemitah. And then there was an accident in an airplane which was spraying crops. You're not allowed to do that during Shemitah year. An airplane was spraying crops, and the wind blew all the spray over onto his greenhouses and wiped out his flower crop. He lost a fortune. He was very upset. He was very, very upset. And then out of the blue, several months later, he gets a huge check in the mail. Far more than compensation for what he lost. Why did he get a check in the mail? Because the company that did the spraying took responsibility and paid compensations. He didn't even take them to court. He didn't even know who they were. And it was, it was an accident of the wind. So we don't believe in accidents. However, if a family, let's say the mother's a working mother and she can't really take care of her children, she has to give them to somebody else to take care of them. So it's quite possible that every year she's having another child. And some women can do it and some women can't. It just wears them down. And if they really feel, the doctor feels that it's dangerous for them, then there's a heter to practice birth control. But it has to go through Rabbanim and then it has to go through doctors. Esther Vela, under healthy conditions, not necessary. We're finishing up chapter 12. How much longer do we have? Another week? 2 weeks?
This week and then like 2 days.
This week and 2 days. Gosh, I'm gonna miss you all.
Miss you too.
Okay, let's start on page 184. We'll move right along. We've been discussing in great detail the idea that every person, this is from the Zohar, it's actually deep Kabbalah. Every person has the ability to control his mind and to control his desires and to redirect them. When a person has very, very strong desires, to direct them into healthy channels, into healthy and to holy channels, so that the garments of the soul, now remember, there's the essence of the soul, and the Tanya discusses the three basic levels of the soul, which is nefesh, ruach, and neshama. The nefesh is most connected with the person's body. That's the life that's in your body. That gives energy to you, the basic energy you have to live, all your powers, your soul powers, what are your soul powers? Power to see, power to hear, power to digest your food, power to move. Power to do things with your hands, power to smell, power to taste. Where do these powers come from? They come from the life that's within you. Where does that life come from? That life comes from what's called the nefesh. And higher than that, where does the nefesh get its life from? From the level of the soul that's called the ruach, the spirit. And where does it get its life from? It gets its life from the neshama. We always talk about, the Jewish neshama is neshama king. But really, strictly speaking, according to the Tanya, according to Kabbalah, the neshama is much higher, much, much higher. So that if we imagine that everything is in the same image, person is made in the image of God. What's the image of God? We learned that in chapter 3, is 3 aspects of the intellect, 7 aspects of the emotions. That's purely in spiritual terms. And our soul is also in the same form. So another way of describing this form is head, torso, legs. Bottom of the legs is the feet. The same thing applies to the soul. The head of the soul is Chachma Bina Das on every level, Chabad. And the torso, the body of the soul, is the seven midos, which reminds us another power to digest your food and so on. And the lower levels of the soul, the feet. So it says about the neshama, it says in a Song of Songs, which people think is a love song from King Solomon to the Queen of Sheba, it's really very, very deep Kabbalah, if you will, mysticism, mystical thought. So it says, how beautiful were your steps and shoes. That's an expression of love from a young man to his beloved. How beautiful were your steps and your beautiful shoes. Going after me when you followed me into the wilderness. What's he talking about? When the Jews left Egypt and they followed Hashem into the wilderness with complete trust. And he gave us water, and he gave us man to eat, and he gave us the clouds to prevent us from suffering from the heat or the cold at night. Heat by day, the cold by night. What does it mean according to mystical thinking? How beautiful were your steps and shoes to the neshama. The feet of the neshama are higher than the highest level of the nefesh or the ruach. So the shoes being referred to here are the lower levels of the soul called nefesh and ruach, and the feet, how beautiful were your feet and shoes, refers to the lowest levels of the neshama, that only the lowest levels of the neshama, like we call them the feet of the neshama, are capable of having a contact with you as a physical being. But the neshama itself is so holy and so high that we can't even deal with it in our blunted sensitivities. Understand? Okay. So we have the essence of the soul. What is the essence of the soul? It's very, very deep. The essence of the soul we learned in the second chapter, first line, second chapter of the Tanya. The essence of the soul and the neshama is part of God. How can you have a part of God? God is one. So we can take out the words apart. It's God. Where is God? Where you let him in. Your soul is an essence of God. All right? I can't deal with that. So it has to be stepped down, levels and levels and contractions. And the next thing we deal with is where the essence of God begins to appear as a form, a totally spiritual form. The spiritual form, chapter 3, spiritual forms, the three aspects of intellect. Chabad, in the world of Atzilus, in the world of godliness. Chabad, Hashem has Chachma. Hashem has understanding, Bina. Hashem has knowledge, Das. Therefore, we also have, because we're created in that image. So the essence of the soul now is we're on a lower level that we would describe as the 10 supernal spheres, 10 very high spheres. And then as we move on in learning the Tanya, we come up to the garments of the soul, right, Esther Bela? The garments of the soul. We keep coming back to this concept. The garments of the soul are how the soul expresses itself. The essence of the soul is these 10 spheres. Well, people don't walk around. You can't see the 10 spheres in somebody, but you can see how the 10 spheres act out in this person's life. How do they act out? In what he does, what she does. Just like you're wearing clothes. Your clothes aren't you, but they tell me a lot about you. They make a very, very strong message to the whole world. And the world picks up on it. I remember when I was a teenager and I knew nothing about Yiddishkeit, And I used to drive by an area where there was a Hasidic school. I don't know what they were, what group of Hasidim they were connected with. But I saw these teenage boys. I loved sports. I loved to play sports. I saw these boys trying to play soccer. They didn't even know how to run. And they were playing sports in these long coats below their knees. And they were like running underhand. I used to look at them. I said, why do they dress like that? It used to bother me. I didn't want to be associated at that point in my life with this old-fashioned image of Jewish people that was caricaturized in anti-Semitic cartoons as a despised image. You see, your garments can convey a very strong message. And the message is, I was 27 years old when I met a person who was teaching Kabbalah. He wasn't even Jewish. And I saw these Hebrew letters. And I said, what are the Hebrew letters doing here? What are Hebrew letters doing here? And I thought back to these impressions, my teenage impressions when I was 15 and 16 years old. It was like 10 years earlier. I said, is that why the Hasidim dress like that? Is that in response to some mystical learning that they do, or that they know? And he answered me a very true answer that had a profound effect on me. You know what he answered me? He said, ask a Hasid. If you want to know the answer to that question, ask someone who knows. Don't play games. If you're interested, find out the answer. I did. I did. 6 months later, I was keeping Shabbos. Never look back. So you see, your clothes convey a message to the world that you believe in God. And that's why you dress the way you dress. You go on the subway and see other people dressed for the beach. You don't do that. So the garments of your soul that express itself are how you dress, how you behave. You walk down the street, you see a poor person, you give a quarter. That's how you behave. You see someone in the street, I remember when it became fashionable. I'm old enough to remember these things. I noticed the change. When people who were professional people, to say doctors and lawyers and accountants and financial people, began to swear. Didn't used to. All of a sudden they were using 4-letter words to show that they were, I don't know what they wanted to show. They were just regular people. I remember being, as a young guy, teenager, being shocked. And then I saw it became normal. And then even women began to use 4-letter words. Women, fancy women, How you speak tells us who you are. You are what you say. When you say things that are wise, then you are connecting with wisdom, and your wisdom is expressing itself through your words. And you can tell a person who he is by what he says. Just like it's a very popular expression, you are what you eat. Comes from flesh and blood. Well, even more so, you are what you say. So we always have to try to say good things. And this is the lesson of last week's Parsha and the Parsha before, Parsha's Miriam. Miriam was afflicted with leprosy, as it was in those days. Why? Because she spoke about Moshe to her brother Aaron. Family. She couldn't speak about her own brother, Halochana. And his Toam. Oh, everybody. Swallows are coming back to Capistrano. Just missing Sarah Cole. Hamadina.